Hello and welcome back to another episode of the MVP podcast. My name is Anthony Merrow.
And I'm Phil Van Pelt. Thank you guys, as always, for spending some time with us here on the MVP podcast. I'm excited. I say it every week, but it's another week closer to football. We had real college football last week. Awesome to see. Now we're on to another full-time all college football all weekend. It's officially week one, not even week zero. And this is our last prediction show because next week we're going to be bringing you actual week one predictions. And we have live NFL football coming at you next week. Super excited, super ready. I have quite a few fantasy drafts coming up too, so I'm pumped for that. But this is the cap off to the season predictions to see how well we do rolling into the season. So I can't wait. I know you're excited too. We do a lot of homework for this, and we're going to kick things off with the NFC, just like we've been doing. We're going to start with the NFC West. Anthony, talk to me about how you see this playing out, because I'm pretty sure we're going to have the same bottom, but then it'll probably mix up a little bit. So I'm excited to see. But tell me why the Seahawks are four, because I know you got to have the Seahawks at four.
It's the Seahawks. Like, this used to be the strongest division in football where it was very hard to predict. That officially is now the AFC West. And it's impossible to look at the NFC West and say that the Hawks aren't the worst team here. You traded Russell Wilson, you released Bobby Wagner and Carlos Dunlap, and in doing so, they enter basically a full-blown rebuild. They weren't good with Wilson last year. And granted, I know he was hurt. He had the messed up finger. He missed 3 games. Then he played a couple of weeks injured for a good chunk of the season there. They did, however, embrace the draft, right? They had a decent draft. They snuck Noah Fant in that Wilson trade and really stole Uchenna Nwosu from the Chargers in free agency. And I thought that was a really sneaky move. He only had 5 sacks last year, but he put a ton of pressure on quarterbacks. He broke a lot of pockets. So if he can transition that into sacks, that he'll only become more valuable. I think it was a really good addition for them. Their new quarterback duo was potentially the worst in the entire NFL with Drew Lock and Geno Smith. It's not exactly good. It's just weird to see that what last year we were saying was the strongest division in football is now looking pretty weak, and it starts with the Seahawks. I see the Hawks having a 4-win season. I think they're going to go 4-13 as they embrace this rebuild, shore up on draft picks, and they play all of their young guns, get them those very important reps to see what they have, potentially a diamond in the rough. You never know.
Yeah, there's things about the Seahawks to like, and it's mostly on offense because of, DK and Tyler Lockett. I don't necessarily think Noah Fant's going to have a big year. I think that whoever's the quarterback, as we see, eventually we're going to see Drew Lock. I'm sure it's going to be a revolving door, because if you're playing that bad, basically, if we're predicting the Seahawks to be as bad as we think that they will be, a lot of people think that they will be, it's kind of hard to imagine that you go through the whole season with one quarterback. Why, right? What continuity are you building? Because you're going to draft a different guy, especially between those two, where you're like, is he the future? Well, the jury's kind of out on both those guys. So are we going to draft another guy for the future? Probably. So see if the other guy can make it stick a little better and potentially becomes the guy there. And if you just roll with Geno Smith all year, you're never going to know that about Drew Lock. Maybe a new area and he vibes with those receivers better. Maybe he's the one that kills it and revives his career somehow there. But again, I'm not super hyped on anything that the Seahawks have done. And defensively, I'm a little worried. It's the worst roster in football, just like you said. One of the lower end, bottom of the barrel rosters in football. The division is the worst. And, trading Wilson, yes, I know it yielded some good return, and it was one of the biggest stories we had all offseason, but both Geno Smith and Drew Lock are just massive downgrades. And you mentioned that they struggled with him last year too. So it's kind of hard to, see anything positive happening with these guys. Like I said, the weapons are there. Backfield depth, Rashad Penny is back. If he can continue last year's momentum and actually stay healthy, that's, sneaky to potentially have a solid year there. Probably going to lean on the run game a lot. Kenneth Walker coming in as a draft pick. One of the best running backs in the draft coming out. And then you still got DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. I'm obviously high on both those guys because they're Canes. I love them. DJ is one of my favorite Canes of all time. I love Travis Homer. I've seen a lot of prognosticators talking about these guys out there, these analysts talking about how DJ Dallas could potentially have a sneaky good year fantasy-wise and potentially be the second guy behind Rashad Penny, or if he can't stay healthy, maybe a two-headed duo with Kenneth Walker, depending on how he does. So I'm excited to see that. On the line, Charles Cross replaces Dwayne Brown at left tackle. They're young across the line. You mentioned Bobby Wagner on D. He's gone. Outside of Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, and Jordan Brooks, like who scares you on that defense? There's no one that really scares you
They don't have a lot of
on
playmakers.
defense. So like, what are they going to do? And here's an interesting stat about them. The defense will be bad to me. Last year, they ranked 11th, in points allowed, despite being second in yards given up through the air. So a crazy
Wow.
concoction of stuff. I don't know how you pull that off. So they really have to be just out of this world in red zone efficiency, and things kind of broke their way because they were really good in the red zone last year. And they're going to have to continue that to have any shot, because really on the surface, that's all setting up to be a defense that gives up a lot of points. And I don't necessarily think I think that last year was an anomaly, and we'll see that kind of flip this year. I think their ceiling could be 7 wins if things click. I don't see that. They're going to have breakout pieces for the future. And I do think finding that signal caller, like I mentioned earlier, is huge. I think that there could be something here that there's pieces on the team. When you look at receiver, running back, those guys on defense, if you can add a few, things change quick in the NFL. If you can add a few, and if you find that quarterback, I think things can flip around quick for the Hawks. Year to year, things change a lot in the NFL, but I have them going 5-12. So I do not have a good season for the Seahawks. But yeah, there's pieces there that they can jump back, because let's be real, it wasn't that far removed. They aren't that far removed from being a really consistent team. But this year won't be one of them. To me, bottom out, get that high draft pick and find the guy for the future and build this thing back up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm glad we're on the same page for 3 there, or for 4 rather. Moving into 3, I have the Cardinals. The Cards had one of the weirdest seasons last year, right? They start 7-0, and then the wheels just completely fell off. And they still finished with a pretty good record of 11-6. Part of their downfall was losing D-Hop for 7 of their last 9 games, where they went 4-5 in the back 9 of the stretch there. But now he's out for the first 6 weeks, right? He had
lost 4 to 5.
They went 4-5 in the last 9 games.
4-5. I think you lost.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad.
No, you're good. No worries. But now he's out for the first 6 weeks of the season, right? He had that PED situation, so now you're missing him. Chase Edmonds is gone. He's on your Fins. Christian Kirk is gone, overpaid to go to the Jaguars. Hollywood Brown is going to fill in for that role, but you just lost your 1 and 2 receivers, and you replaced them with Hollywood Brown, who's good, very talented player, but that doesn't replace D-Hop, one of the best receivers in all of football. So their receiver core is something to be desired at the moment. And that doesn't even address losing Chandler Jones to the Raiders. Plus all the drama around Kyler not being extended and the poor coaching of Cliff Kingsbury. You know how I feel about him already. This is kind of a recipe for disaster for the Cardinals. I think there's a lot of things to not like here. And especially the Kyler Murray situation cannot be overstated. If he doesn't feel happy, we talk about sports being mental. It's a really mental game beyond your physical talent and abilities. If you're not wanted in a situation, which we were talking about this with Tua a lot last year, if you feel like things aren't going your way, maybe you start playing a little bit lower than your standards. We can see that really click in potentially for Murray, a very young quarterback who's not being paid what he feels he's worth. Comes up, now he's not playing to the full caliber he's available to play at. The Cards seem to be trending in the wrong direction after a pretty promising year last year, especially that start. And unless Kyler takes another leap forward, this team just on paper is worse all around. I think they're going to be around a 500 team this year. And that's kind of where I had them. I have them at a very underwhelming 8-9.
Well, we're on the same page because I have the Cardinals in 3rd place too. But Kyler is, I want to say, a little temperamental is how people view it. I think as far as like people question the maturity and kind of like, I don't know if it's I get my way kind of thing. And I don't know the guy. I'm just saying from kind of what you hear these analysts talk about, and that's, being mental like that. Is he a guy that kind of sulks? What are you going to get out of Kyler? So that's the big question that we have. That's their ceiling, because he's their franchise. They just inked him to that huge contract, but they did, right? You talk about guys they lost. They lost Chase Edmonds. They lost Christian Kirk. They lost Chandler Jones. Okay, he's the franchise's all-time leading sack leader. That's a lot. I don't think they used Chase Edmonds very well, and I do think that Christian Kirk got way overpaid by the Jaguars. There's no one that doesn't agree with that.
Yeah,
but that's still a lot to lose. You mentioned that they did replace. They brought in Hollywood Brown. They basically traded their 1st-round pick. They did trade their 1st-round pick for Hollywood Brown. So to them, Hollywood Brown better be a 1st-round pick, performance-wise.
Yeah,
and it's going to try to. They're lessening the blow of D-Hop being gone, but we saw what that offense was without him last year. Yep. They do have Rondell Moore. Okay, that's going to help somewhat already. Brown and Kyler Murray do have connection. They have chemistry from playing college at Oklahoma together. They should click quick. How we view Murray, though, I think that the offense should be formidable because of that, because it's how everybody thinks he's this top end quarterback. And especially when you get D Hop back and how good he is, James Conner can ball. Zach Ertz still has juice at tight end. Feels top heavy to me. And they've really performed like unbelievably the past 2 years and then just fallen off a cliff. So for that to happen, if they don't start fast, starting fast is the only thing that's kept that season from being, because we talk about like how I've seen my Dolphins the past couple of years. Last year, a terrible start, and then they rebound and end up with a winning record. Seven losses, 7 straight wins. The year before they started, what was it? 1-3 and then ended up going 10-6. Like, you have these rebounds. Somehow some teams kind of do it. There's different ways that we see the Broncos start fast and then flounder, but we haven't seen collapses like this from anybody really but the Cardinals. Like, this team's a Super Bowl favorite. Look at them. They're the last undefeated team. This team is going to go on a run, and then the wheels just fall all the way off. So they were 1-4 their last 5 games after that crazy start, like I talked about, surpassed 23 points just twice. Okay, injuries are a part of it, but defense struggled a lot too. Connor's backup right now with Edmonds gone is 6th-round pick Keontae Ingram. He could ball, he could step up, he needs to. Connor has an injury history. 4 of the 5 offensive linemen return. I like that with Arizona. Continuity, but only Rodney Hudson signed through 2023, so that could be short-lived. They can't replace Chandler Jones, though. He's franchise all-time sack leader, like I mentioned. They didn't try, and the big piece of this defense to me, what's going to make this defense successful or the make or break really, is the linebackers, because they have some high picks invested in Xavier Collins and Isaiah Simmons. If they don't perform to their first round potential, these guys, there's not a lot to love for this team on the defensive line or in the secondary for me. There's not. So I think they just picked up Trayvon Mullen from the Raiders. I think that trade just went down, so that could add some depth. The Raiders gave up on him. The offense last year was inept without Hopkins. Maybe it takes that step, but I think that this is could be the year that Kingsbury gets fired. But I do have them going 9-8. I have them with a winning record. But after those starts and how the ceilings that we've seen this team have, or 5-0 or 5-2 or something 2 years ago, and then the wheels fell off, and like I talked about last year, there's heat on Kingsbury for a reason, because this team needs to take that next step. So 9-8, I have them finishing around 500, but a winning record. But yeah, they're my 3rd place team as well.
It's hard to say that Kingsbury doesn't have a hot seat. We were saying he had a hot seat last year. They always have these really quick starts to the season, 7-0, 6-1, 5-2, and then everything just falls apart in the back half. They got to figure out that problem, and it seems to be consistent, right? At this point, it's a trend. For 2nd place, I have the Niners, right? This is a phenomenal team. They made the NFC Championship game last year. San Fran handed the keys over to Trey Lance now, and he had a pretty outstanding preseason. Can't get too excited about preseason, right? But the tools are there for something special. Their defense is retained. We talked about last year, their most important free agents were their own. They have a championship caliber roster. It's just a matter of getting it to the next level. And hopefully that next piece is their quarterback change going to Trey Lance. They retained basically their entire defense. They kept Deebo Samuel. There was a lot of noise about him potentially leaving, and that would have been devastating to them because of his versatility.
He demanded a trade.
He demanded a trade, but they paid him as a receiver, right? He's no longer going to be used as much as running back, but the potential for him doing that is still there, right? We saw him do it, and he did phenomenal at it. It's just that's a really hard position to play, especially for someone that's technically supposed to be a receiver. It's still possible for him to take snaps as a back, though. We already know what he can do. They did lose some depth at their O-line. You lose Alex Mack, Laken Tomlinson. Alex Mack retired. So that definitely hurts. But the Niners are still a really well-built team. They have such a deep roster. On the underrated side of things, though, Mike McDaniel is a huge loss. I don't even think they have an offensive coordinator to replace him yet. Shanahan obviously can cover that up. He's still a genius at what he does. But you can't replace like a Mike McDaniel, right? He's also lauded as a genius on the sidelines there. The Niners probably have a higher ceiling than the Rams, I think, in my opinion, just because of the strength of schedule. I'm a really big strength of schedule guy. The Rams have the toughest one in the NFL. I think the Niners have the 5th toughest. But having their offense in the hands of a potential boom or bust kind of player like Lance might damage their consistency. And that's kind of what's going to pull them back a little bit. Their schedule still isn't easy by any means, but I can see them racking up 11 wins. This team is still phenomenal. I'd have them going 11-6.
Yeah, I mean, I have him in third place too, and we're gonna or second place too, excuse me. And we're gonna have this. Obviously, we're gonna be the same across the board. I think the next one's gonna be fun because we're gonna differ a lot. I have a feeling, but this one where I thought we'd be different at the top or in the middle, not necessarily the top. I think we both kind of thought we'd have the Rams there, and we obviously do. But this whole thing with the Niners comes down to how good is Trey Lance really. And the thing about it now that gives me even more pause, I could potentially raise the Niners to more of what you said, 11 wins. I have them going 10-7. But the 11 wins for me because they kept Jimmy Garoppolo. They restructured. So something happened where they just don't feel completely confident that game in and game out, he's going to be the consistent force at quarterback to get them where they need to be because the roster is talented. How consistent will Trey Lance be? He's going to be the starter, but is he going to get pulled? Are we going to see a back and forth thing? If you pull him, do you go back to him? Because then you have a confidence thing or put him back in. You don't want to pull, put him in, pull him out, put him in, pull him out. You don't want to go the back and forth situation. You got to stick with him. But again, he's coming from an FCS level school, didn't play that last year with the COVID situation. And now here we go straight, top of the draft board, gets picked high. He's crazy talented. But again, you'll have these huge games. And then I bet you'll have games where he just bottoms out where like, dude, you got to stop the bleeding somehow. Now they have weapons. You mentioned obviously Debo. Debo, Fred Warner on defense, Nick Bosa, George Kittle. Those are the guys on that team that are kind of irreplaceable to me. I feel like they're a little top heavy. Big thing for me. I think that Shanahan, he is their de facto offensive coordinator right now. I think that he's going to maximize these guys' talents because that's what he does. He's good. I do think he's going to miss Mike McDaniel a lot. He's been with him a while and seen a lot of success. And remember, he was, the run game coordinator and the offensive line or offensive coordinator as well. So this guy set up what was successful about Debo last year and how Debo did that. Now Shanahan obviously is a part of that. And I just think, you when you're running Debo like that, you're risking that your most valuable weapon is going to get hurt.
Yep.
And the guy's had injury history too. So you don't want him, they can get hurt on any play, no matter what, non-contact, contact. But when you're running him between the tackles and stuff, I think you're going to do that just more sparingly. But that's the thing, right? How much do injuries ultimately affect this team? Elijah Mitchell last year, the running back, he missed 6 games. Emmanuel Mosley did too. 3 games from George Kittle were lost. Jason Verrett lost 16. Okay, it speaks to their depth for how well they did despite that and getting to the NFC Championship game. The team is talented, but remember, the year before that, injuries killed their season. So those same injuries to those guys, a lot of those guys, or, obviously Kittle was gone for a lot of that season, it took them from a Super Bowl team to they couldn't. They had a terrible year because injuries crushed them. So now you wonder, okay, have losses in the offseason. How much is that going to hurt them? But again, when you look at this, how top heavy this is, guess how much Debo and Kittle combined for last year? How many total yards do you think those two combined for?
Probably say close to 3,000.
Yeah, you're right. 2,700 total yards, 20 touchdowns, and 148 grabs between those two guys. You lose one of those guys, that's a huge amount. So any of those guys that I named can't replace them. Talents there across the board. They ranked 3rd in total defense last year, and the NFL had the NFL's 6th fewest passing yards allowed, despite leading the league with 21 PIs, pass interference, 3rd fewest pass breakups, and had the 5th fewest picks, and the 5th highest completion percentage against them. So I don't know what the hell this secondary is. Was that a kind of another mirage, like the stat I mentioned earlier with the Seahawks? Like, yet they did better despite that. That doesn't seem like a sustainable year in and year out. So the secondary could be, something to leave something to be desired. Not going to line up again. And this team could overtake the Rams if stuff clicks. They beat them 2 out of 3 times last year, but new quarterback has such a wide spectrum of results. But again, now with Jimmy, you wonder, is this ceiling higher or is it lower? Do they flip back and forth? What happens with it? It's really interesting because they kept him for a reason, and it can't be because they're super confident that Lance is going to do what they hope. They hope he does and he balls out all year, but they got to have some worry that at some point he's going to hit a lull and they're going to be in the conversation that they can't risk it. And they got to put Jimmy in to kind of save the day. And if that happens, what does that do to his confidence? So I have the Niners going 10-7, 2nd place. But again, it's just such a wide range of results possible with a quarterback like that who just, he's all talent, but he didn't even play at the highest level. And then he missed that whole year. And it's just, I know he played some last year, but it just is a lot to say, okay, now here you go. That's just for me.
Yeah, I think that they're actually more all in on Trey Lance than you. I feel like Jimmy G's contract and his ability was kind of stalling in the market $21 million is a lot to take for a team. What are you going to give me as incentive to pick up that contract? I think the restructured was significantly less money, but there's a no trade now and no franchise tag. So he's guaranteed to be able to hit free agency next year. Not to mention, it's pretty good insurance to have. Injuries happen. You never know. Having at least a good game manager behind Trey Lance, if something does happen, worst case scenario, he gets hit really hard, he has a concussion, he has to be out for a couple of weeks, maybe he hits the PUP list, make that 4 to 6 weeks. Like if that happens, now at least you have Jimmy Garoppolo to kind of maintain the ship, and he's still a professional.
I get it, but you also with that, it feels like you got the guy behind you breathing down your neck because he was the guy last year. It's one thing if you bring in another competent quarterback and you say maybe this is if we had to go somebody, this is it. But this wasn't the quarterback that took the team to the Super Bowl and has been the guy there. It's not that. It's a guy who comes in and can perform if Trey Lance gets hurt. But what you have now is a guy who feels like you kind of always got to be looking over your shoulder because this guy still has won a lot of games in San Francisco. So
yeah. I would love to be a fly on the wall in the room of them giving Trey Lance a pep talk. Like, you have nothing to worry about, kid. We got your back here. But I totally understand what you're saying. And that is something that may be lurking in the back of his mind. We forget at the end of the day that these people aren't just celebrities or athletes. They're people. They're humans. They will have the same emotions and feelings that we have, regardless of how many commas are in their bank account. They have that insecurity too. So
sometimes
I feel
at a higher level because they're on the national, they're on the big scale all the time.
It's true. There's a lot of pressure on these people, and this guy's a kid, right? Trey Lance is what, like 22? Like he's a young adult. So something to maintain, keep an eye on throughout the course of the season. I feel you on that. That's actually a really good point. But at number one, obviously we have the Rams, the Super Bowl champs. Obviously, they just came off of a huge title, massive for them because they mortgaged their entire future for it, and it worked. But they did see a lot of turnover in the offseason. Von Miller is gone. I don't blame them. I'm not going to match a contract that big. 6 years, $120 million for someone who's pushing the wrong side of 30 is not a good move. Darius Williams is gone on the defensive side of things. OBJ is still a free agent. Obviously, a torn ACL. We don't know when he's going to come back. But there are whispers that he may return to the Rams. Obviously, there's whispers for the Giants return, a couple of other places. But, the Rams are on that list. They did hit a huge signing, though, with Allen Robinson to go alongside Cooper Kupp, who just had a historically great receiver season. And they just added disgruntled Bobby Wagner to shore up that front seven. Wagner has been a Pro Bowler every single year since 2014. He just had a 170 tackle season. So a lot of their losses will be covered up by rookies and a potential trio receiver core of Kupp, Robinson, and OBJ. That's scary. That's a crazy trio. Legit, probably if that does happen and OBJ is healthy, even just like a reminiscent of 80% of what he was last year, that might be the best trio receiver core in the entire NFL. Last year, we were talking about the triumvirate in Dallas being like Cooper, Gallup, and Lamb. I think Kupp, Robinson, and OBJ absolutely destroys that lot. Their biggest moves, though, this offseason were just retaining their core. You stopped Aaron Donald from potentially retiring. They re-signed Stafford and Kupp. This is a proven roster to win a Super Bowl. They just did it. So it was maintaining the ship was important, and they did. Their schedule this year is going to be brutal. I'm a huge strength of schedule guy. They have arguably the best roster in football, but you're going to have the toughest schedule in football. I expect them to go 12-5, but I wouldn't be shocked if they actually drop the division title and go 10-7 with how strong that schedule is. I still have them going 12-5 though.
Yeah, the Rams are stacked. They're stacked. They're the number one team. They won the Super Bowl for a reason. You mentioned the potential at wide receiver. They did lose Robert Woods, who was really good for them for a while. Yeah. And even if they do re-sign OBJ, the thing for me is he's not going to play until later in the year with the ACL. But you have maybe the best wide receiver in football with Cooper Kupp. You brought in Allen Robinson, like you talked about too, and that's huge. I think I'm a big believer that Allen Robinson just played with not good quarterbacks, not good systems. Last year he was kind of set up for failure as far as the Bears didn't want to seem like they were losing all that much and potentially, what they might have to pay the guy. He's playing on the franchise tag. And I just think a lot of the offense wasn't designed to go through him, and he kind of just suffered away there and kind of wasted away. But now we're going to see him in LA, and he's but barring injury, the guy's going to have a big year. I'm a big fan of Allen Robinson. And so hate be damned, the guy's gonna ball, I think. So finally has a good quarterback throwing the ball there too with Matt Stafford, and I think it's gonna pay dividends. Andrew Whitworth did retire. Austin Corbett, excuse me, left in free agency. Darius Williams, like you said, left for the Jags. But Bobby Wagner coming in is bigger than anything else to me. Turnover on both sides of the ball, though. So they're gonna have some things they're gonna have to sort out. They're battle tested. They got through a grueling division last year and a grueling NFC run to win the whole damn thing. Finished one game better than the Cards. Is they took on those Cards just took on water faster than the Titanic did last year. But that speaks to how good of a season that they started out having, because at the end the Rams still just, hey, they were able to catch them. But we were talking about there's no way they're going to be the number one seed. That they're balling. These guys are killing it. The Cardinals are, and they're just going to keep rolling. Finished 2 games better than the Niners. The Niners beat them twice in the regular season, lost to them in the playoffs, obviously. They outscored their opponents by 88 points last year. They're going to be a force. They're going to be. They did lose Sony Michel as well. He handled things while Akers was out last year. See if Akers can carry the load. Can he stay healthy? A big key for me here, Joe Noteboom, is he going to blossom as the left tackle? They hope. Okay, the season really depends on that. Stafford's blind side. They also brought in Troy Hill to replace Williams. Very underrated. I like that move a lot. So really, 16 of the 22 starters come back, and they upgraded 3 spots with Robinson, Hill, and Wagner. Okay, those 3 guys to me are all upgrades at those positions, just age. And I think Bobby Wagner he's an overall better. He's still one of the best linebackers in football. He's a better linebacker. He's a better player than Von Miller. Maybe he doesn't have the pass rushing prowess, but again, the contract that the Bills gave Vaughn and all that stuff,
Yeah,
to me,
it's not worth it.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And I understand you just saw the difference he made in LA. So you translate that. Good for him. He went and got that bag. The guy's going to be a Hall of Famer one day. Yeah. He's made a bunch of money. He's making even more money. He relayed this all perfectly. But no team also, to say this, has repeated as Super Bowl champ since the 03-04 Pats did. But this team has a good shot. And remember, on top of all of that, Cooper Kupp, all these guys we mentioned, we didn't even talk about Aaron Donald, and he's still the best defender in football. So I have the Rams going 13-4. Some division losses probably in there, with the 4. But the Rams are good, and they're going to win a lot of games. And, they'll probably lose a game or 2 that we don't expect them to lose. Remember last year they had that lull. They dropped like 3 or 4 in a row.
Yeah.
There's a game. They just kept losing games. But what happened when it mattered? I mean, they almost got Brady'd and the whole Bucks, again, that Bucks game, they almost lost that. But, they're right there and they won it. So that goes a long way. Now, could they take their foot off the gas a little bit? Yeah. But generally, historically, you worry more about the team that didn't win the Super Bowl missing again. That's kind of what you think, even though it should motivate you more. But have the Rams winning that division, 13-4, not necessarily winning it all. Maybe we'll touch on that in the next, prediction for the first week, kind of what we think about that stuff. But with that, guys, we're on to the AFC West and how we have this shaken out. So I'm going to try this again because this is the toughest division. Save the best for last.
This is hard, man.
This is tough. And all these teams, regardless of where we have them, have a shot to be a lot higher. And I guess the way the division shakes out could be lower. They just cannibalize each other. Which I mentioned throughout this, cannibalizing each other, beating each other the hell up. They could all split with each other, honestly, across the board. And if injuries happen, obviously that's the ultimate unpredictable thing here. But I feel like with these, though, we're both going to have the same number 4, and this stuff's going to start getting tricky because I'm interested to see what you say, but what do you have it for?
Man, this is the new strongest division in football. It sucked having to put anyone at 4 because each of these teams can win 10, 11, or 12 games. There's potential that this entire division can be in the playoffs. If I didn't believe so much in the Niners, that's the potential here. That this is a phenomenal, it's impossible to pick. But I have the Raiders. It's hard to say the Raiders didn't get much better. They were really good last year. But most of their success was surprising, right? After all the crazy situations they had, John Gruden, the emails, you have Henry Ruggs with manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter. There wasn't like a caveat of there being something incredible brewing here throughout the course of the season. Every time they did something great, a string of good wins, it was like surprising. It was like, wow, I can't believe they really did that. Like they garnered and galvanized behind tragedy consistently, all the distractions, and it was mighty impressive. Derek Carr pushed his name up the quarterback tier list like the entire season last year. Now he has the best receiver in football. They stole Davante Adams. Max Crosby played with maximum effort all year last year, which culminated in the final game of the season, arguably the best game of the season, regular season that is, because obviously we had that Bills Chiefs incredible playoff game, but he was incredibly responsible for their win there. It was amazing, and now he has Chandler Jones on that front four just to help him out. The Raiders should have more stability at the helm now. No more John Gruden. They get Josh McDaniels from Bill Belichick's tree. The Raiders have a very good ceiling. I think they can be a 12-5 team. But to steal one of your quotes, I need to see it. I have them going 9-8. Somebody in this division has to be the loser. You can assume this division is going to cannibalize itself and split across the board. So that's 3-3 baseline for every single team here. But one team may go 2-4, right? I think it's the Raiders.
Yeah. So once again, we start the same. I mean, our records weren't the same across the board. They were for. I don't even think they weren't. Our records were all different.
We were
game off on all of them. But yeah, this is the same. To start this, I have the Raiders and I have them going the same record. And I don't know what it is. It's something about them that it just feels like of those teams, and that's probably unfair to an extent. It probably feels like it's just bias on history stuff of what we've seen from the Raiders and kind of what feels like this functionality that's kind of followed them. And then not to mention, I just saw a stat on how much they've missed on all these first round picks with just releasing Alex Leatherwood, but their draft in general, their last few drafts. I mean, both Josh Jacobs and Clyde Farrell declined their 5th-year options. Trayvon Mullen just got traded. One of their corners, I'm totally forgetting his name, but he got arrested for the whole gun photo thing. And then he was cut. And then obviously Henry Ruggs had his manslaughter thing. And there's just a lot of stuff here. And it goes back a few years. There was a stat that was shared by CBS and how badly they've drafted the past couple of years. So it's just something about it. It feels like if anyone's going to do it, it's them. But again, the Raiders could mess around and go win 13 games. So it's hard to necessarily say because I do like their core. They added, again, something, I don't know if you even touched on this. I was reading something in the middle of that too, just to, on this subject, but they did add Chandler Jones, who you talk about with Max Crosby on the other side, Max Effort. That's big time. 107 and a half career sacks. Davante Adams, his old college quarterback is Derek Carr. They're playing together. We see that a lot in the NFL, pairing these guys together. You see Kyler and now Hollywood Brown, obviously Tua and Waddle and Hurts and Devontae Smith. And you see all these guys that were college teammates balling again. Well, he and Darren Waller now create a two-headed monster at receiver. Yeah. Hunter Renfrow is going to benefit a lot. And Josh Jacobs at running back, he's going to benefit too. Colton Miller at left tackle for them. He's become one of the best in the game. Andre James at center is good. To me, there's questions at the guard and right tackle position. I just talked about former first-round pick Alex Leatherwood. I was mad at the Raiders for drafting him. The guy was falling. People projected him as a second-round pick. I was mad because the Bama tied Mike Cain's record for most guys drafted in the first round ever with 6 guys going in the first round. It was a hurricane record, and I was pissed because there was no reason for Alex Leatherwood to be drafted in the first round. And, go figure, I was right about that. So they tied the record. And this guy's not even on the roster 2 years later. He didn't need to be a first-round pick, but that's what the Raiders do. They're not the best at it, and they have solid pieces, so they're winning, and they're playing well. But he's gone. And the Bears picked him up, I believe. So protection could be an issue at times. Having Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, great two-headed monster, just like Waller and Adams are on offense. Crosby led the NFL last year, 82 pressures. Denzel Perryman and Divine Diablo are manning the backer spots. Great linebackers. Perryman's a Pro Bowler. Trayvon Mullen and Rock Ya-Sin, they should benefit from having a line to get a better line in front of them with those guys. But now Trayvon Mullen's gone. I believe I was talking about he just got traded to the Cardinals. So he's gone. So that changes everything when we do our research and kind of, re-up on some of these stats and stuff. And now he's gone. So that changes stuff. I do think that they have strengths that are very, 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 very strong strengths on offense and defense that can offset some of the things they don't do well. Here's the thing, though. Last year, you talk about it always feels like they weren't really that team. Was it fool's gold? Was there something about it that was missing? team was punching above their pay grade, and anomalies like I talked about with those defensive stats for the Hawks and the Niners last year, finishing okay, but yet having a bad year, giving up a lot through the air, but yet still, keeping teams out of the touchdown. This stuff doesn't generally equate, doesn't generally equal out like that, but you see that sometimes. The Raiders were outscored last year by 65 points. I made a 7-2 record in one-score games. Think about what we talked about the Lions having. It's so easy to go the other way.
Flipped.
Yeah, exactly. And they won all those close games. Now you want to, and every team's going to have close games, and you got to win those close games. Absolutely. But you're not always going to do that. And a division and a conference that's that tough, hell, 7-2 in one-score games. So that means 9 games, they were one-score games. We watched that one-score game against the Dolphins. They should have lost. If that was called pass interference, that would have been on the goal line. We saw them win that game against the Ravens in week 1, a crazy game. Their whole beginning of their season, they kept eking out games that they probably shouldn't have won. But yet, there they go, and they found a way to do it. But 9 games, what if they're 4-5 in those? That's everything changes in the division. The conference is too tough to survive that. They are better, but does luck fall on their side? That's really where it is for me. And it did last year. And they're 9-8 to me this year. And again, the ceiling though, it could all click and they could be great. But I have 9-8, and someone's got to finish last. That's just the nature of it, unfortunately.
It's true, man, and it's not a detraction from what this team can be. It's a level of respect. Like, we don't want to put them here. This team did something incredible last year. I got to see them do it again to see if it's real or not. And even so, 9-8 is a positive record, and it's a positive record in the toughest division in football. Like, every other team here got significantly better, except for the Chiefs. They took a step backwards, but they were already the gold standard. So it's tough to say that the Raiders are the upper echelon on in this crazy division.
What's funny is ultimately how this may work out, honestly, is the team that finishes in fourth place, there's a shot that they have a losing record because of how tough the conference and the division is. But we're just giving the benefit of the doubt that they still finish with a winning record right now. And it could be them. It could be the Chargers, could be the Chiefs. It's hard to say it'd be the Chiefs because of how highly people revere them and everything. And they do have a solid roster. And you just don't expect that from them, even though they lost Hill and some other pieces, but Honey Badger and stuff like that. But it very well could be these guys who, one of these teams could end up with a losing record. And it's crazy to think about because it's just, on paper, you're like, well, they're going to be last, but they'll still be good. It's interesting.
It is. Coming in third for me, the Broncos. They had a phenomenal. You knew. Come on, man. You know what my team is right now. The Broncos had a phenomenal offseason. They improved at the 2 most important positions in football. Vic Fangio is gone. Nathaniel Hackett from Green Bay is taking his place. Teddy Two Gloves and Drew Lock were express shipped to Seattle, and Russell Wilson was the return package. And what?
No, Teddy's in Miami. Yeah, they were.
They're gone. I'm just saying, like they're out.
Yeah.
I guess I did say they were both shipped to Seattle.
Yeah.
I meant Drew Lock was shipped to Seattle, but they're both gone. And Russell Wilson is the prized possession of this. And what many would consider a down year for Russ, he still threw for 3,100 yards, 25 touchdowns to 6 interceptions while missing 3 games and playing with torn ligaments for the better part of a couple more, like 3 or 4 more games. That's better stats than Teddy and Drew Lock put out for the entire season. They signed a ton of offensive linemen. They pickpocketed the Cowboys for Randy Gregory. We talked about their secondary all season last year. Those Sam turrets really just set up a solid no-fly zone, and they ranked 8th in opponent pass yards per game. And it's the same, but they improved what they can get from their receivers with Wilson now. He's throwing and Hackett drawing up plays. Courtland Sutton is a phenomenal receiver. He should be back and healthy. Jerry Jeudy is a sensational talent. And they still have Javonte Williams, who had a pretty good season last year, playing all 17 games for the run game. They could still use a solid second back. Melvin Gordon started for 16 of those games, but he's on the wrong side of 30. Like, that's not really the move you want to go for. But Javonte Williams, I think, is going to take over that role for him. Still, the Broncos were decent last year, and they basically didn't really have a solid quarterback. Both of their starters, or people that play their starting role, are backups now. And they were blessed by football gods with a phenomenal offseason with Russell Wilson, who's going to maximize the talent they already have there. This is another team that could win 12 games, but they have to make it work first. I think they go 10-7.
Okay, well,
Here goes there's Chargers in 3. Here we go.
I'm going to bail you out here, and I'm going to tell you that this is all. I'll explain to the audience here why you're wrong in a second, but I'm going to leave the Broncos alone for right now because I do have a third place team, and I know what you're saying, how you feel, how it is right now coming in there, but I think that it's too much sense to me. I have the Chargers. I have the Chargers.
Here we go.
Down for you. Why? Because listen here. They added Zion Johnson, Isaiah Spiller in the draft. Okay. It's a weapon. It's a lineman. They added JC Jackson and Khalil Mack in the offseason too. Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen all had career years. Obviously, Herbert was great, throwing for 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. They need someone to step up and spell Eckler at times. To me, Rashawn Slater, Corey Lindsey, Matt Filer make up a great offensive line, but the right tackle position leaves a little bit of worry for me. JC Jackson's going to miss a couple of games. We don't know how long, a couple of weeks, but that could potentially be longer. It could be shorter. Who knows? Paid a lot of money for him. Is that New England play? Is that New England play going to translate? We see it quite often not translate for guys who ball in New England, but let's say for the sake that it will. Okay, I think he's going to pair well with Asante Samuel Jr. Other corners to me are more uncertain. They drafted 3 defensive backs this offseason for a reason. Khalil Mack's going to pair with Joey Bosa. It's going to be a formidable pair. Okay, something talked about a lot during these. We talk about the receivers and running backs and all these different things that we've talked about. Defensive players. There's always pairs. There's pairs. There's always 2 of these guys. Going back, corner tandems, receiver tandems. We just talked about. That's like the way it's going. You have 1, cool. You have 2. That's where you want to be. And these guys can kill it and get after. They can create turnovers, get after the passer. But here's the thing. It doesn't work for me if they can't stop the run. And guess what all these teams can do? They can all run the ball. Okay. And that's what the Chargers struggle to stop in the division. And to me, they're banking on Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day to take another step forward. Jerry Tillery could honestly be the odd man out with Kyle Van Noy coming in. And it wasn't very long. Jerry Tillery was a very highly, he was highly touted. This guy was supposed to be a high pick. I think he went in the 2nd round. He was getting a lot of late 1st round, getting a lot of contribution for the Chargers. But all of a sudden, we don't know what this guy's going to be. They're also thin at linebacker. Kenneth Murray had offseason ankle surgery, He's stumbled, a bit since they've drafted him. And he was a high, people were high on him coming out. He's at one point a 1st round projection. They have playmakers. They can score from anywhere. Division's going to cannibalize itself, like I mentioned before we got in this, and you just talked about. It's a big pressure year for Staley. His coaching staff, as good as Justin Herbert is and is highly touted and everybody loves him and he's great. And then I talk about Kirk Cousins. Look at how great he is. But yet everybody, he's not better. We don't talk about Kirk Cousins like that. For what? Well, Justin Herbert's 15-17 as a starting quarterback, but yet wins aren't a quarterback stat, but they are when you want them to be. So it's always frustrating me. And I'll die on this hill because people go back and forth. So stay consistent because no one wants to bring up that he has a losing record, that his first year, they didn't do well. He was 2-7 at one point as a starter. Well, look at how good he was. The roster wasn't there. Okay. Like I mentioned, what about Tua? What about Burrow? When the roster is not there, but yeah, Tua still has a winning record. Well, then Burrow was making these guys better around him before he got hurt, and they were winning, right? And then last year they go to the Super Bowl with a team that gave up 9 sacks. The offensive line gave him 9 sacks against the Titans. So there's just a lot of inconsistency with fans for me, and I want to see them take this step because they need to. They one good year, but 9-8. They were expected to make the playoffs. So here we go. This team should make the playoffs. I just want to see it. I want to see that step. I want to see them get out of their own way. Right now, I have them 10-7 though, because the division is tough, and I think that potentially could sneak in depending on how things break. 10-7 is by no means a bad record, and if things shake, again, we're touting up the AFC. Maybe it's worse than people think, but again, I want to see it. And to me, the other 2 quarterbacks that I have ahead of him are proven winners. They both won Super Bowls. They've both been at the top of the game. And to me, they're both better than Justin Herbert. I know people are down on Russell Wilson, but I still think Russell Wilson is the better, more experienced, makes game-winning plays more consistently than just about anybody. And especially, Justin Herbert or, Derek Carr's a gamer. He's had a lot of game-winning drives too. He's a great quarterback with that. But I got to see it. It's the inconsistency, it's the indecisions, because it's these people want to paint a picture one way. But yet I'm pointing it out too. Is it empty calories with Herbert? Why didn't you make the playoffs last year? Why didn't you get there? You're so good. Everybody, oh, look at how great Justin Herbert is. You can't miss. He's a can't miss guy. And I would kill to have him. He's a top 5 quarterback. Well, yes, it's stats, but then the roster matters for them. But it doesn't matter for other players that get the same hate. And you're supposed to take your team. You're supposed to be the reason your team gets in. I can't, every big game he has, I can't see multiple turnovers on top of it where he's thrown into double coverage. I just can't. So I got to see it. That's what you said my thing was. Show it to me. Chargers, get in the playoffs, do it, win. Because right now, that's the team I'm hung on right there. Could this team go win 14 games? Absolutely, they could go win 14 games. But could this team underwhelm like they have the past 2 years? Well, I say it. The first year, there's no expectations. But if Herbert is that good, then they probably should have been a little better. Oh, he's only a rookie. Well, how come that doesn't count with half the other guys in the league? I hate it. It's who they decide they want to crown. So 10-7, that's where the Chargers are right now for me.
You
That's
can't
my
say
soapbox.
that. Yeah. So just for those that didn't hear the subtext and all of that, it was the Fins thing. Everybody's been trashing Tua for the last 2 years, but they've been crowning Herbert. So like that was the frustration coming out.
Statistically, I'll say it. Nowhere close. Tua he was pulled back and forth, and he was coming off a catastrophic hip injury. Didn't play a lot his first year. Injury. Offense was not set up to succeed. He played behind the 32nd ranked offensive line last year. The 30th ranked rushing attack. Receivers were the absolute last in separation. Well, you upgraded all of those. And then, yeah, he still has a winning record. So is that roster? Because then the roster matters. Well, then give the guy who has the ball in his hands every single play a chance to have more time and actually get the ball to weapons like he has now. And we'll see the comparison there. I understand that that's where my thing, but those two are always going to be compared because they're right there.
Yeah.
I honestly would
pick
say,
apart, no?
The 5 and 6. I would honestly say the same thing. There'd be some context for me if I was a Chargers fan too, of like, I know a lot of Charger fans that are, hey, this is a huge year. We got to get in the playoffs. You cannot miss the playoffs again. And yet it's highly touted and it's praised, but where's it been? Because Tua has a better record as a starting quarterback than Herbert does, but that doesn't matter because, the team was good, right? Well, then how come if the team was so good for San Diego, I still want to say they were there forever, LA, then how come Herbert, as great as he is, didn't get him there? How come they went into Houston and laid an egg and got killed by the Texans, who were the worst team in football last year?
Yeah.
How come those games can happen? I'm just saying, if Tua does that, people laugh their ass off. This is a joke. How can this guy be rostered? But yet he's still winning games despite having all these odds stacked against him. And even Joe Burrow, like I talked about, that offensive line was terrible in Cincinnati. They go to the Super Bowl. Where is it? So sorry to interrupt you again. I just want to see consistency.
It's those moments, right? Like we saw Joe Burrow get sacked 9 times and still find a way to beat the Texans. And it wasn't just their defense. He was able to score. Sorry, the Titans. My bad. I'm thinking Texans because you just talked about the Chargers game mollywomped, which they did. And then you look at Herbert, and he has that phenomenal every fourth drive, every fourth down, he finds a way. He just did something incredible, an incredible pass. That was right on the money with pressure because Max Crosby was an animal. We were talking about a second ago. Max Crosby did everything he possibly could to win that game, and they did. But even through it all, like running, doing all the beautiful things, like even when Mahomes lost the Super Bowl, running, diving pass on the money, like those little things, like you see that, you're like, wow. It's because you have those moments, like those Steph Curry-esque moments where it's like, wow, this is really pretty. This is crazy. How did he do that? Which leads me into my number 2, the Chargers. Let's go Bolts. I only have them 1 win away from you, 1 win above. They were horrible at stopping the run last year. I think they were the worst almost in NFL history for the majority of the year. Well, they replaced Kaiser White and Uchenna Nwosu, who I really like, with Khalil Mack and Kyle Van Noy. Those are some pretty hardy upgrades. You throw in J.C. Jackson for their secondary, who is hurt for now, should return in a few weeks. Their offense was never really the issue. Austin Eckler is a phenomenal back, a very under-the-radar career year last year as both a running back and a pass catcher. And I think he had 8 touchdowns in both opportunities there. Mike Williams emerged as a potential number 1 receiver. Behind Keenan Allen, obviously, he's still going to be slated as the number 2. And of course, Justin Herbert. He's a phenomenal quarterback. Now, right there, they're ranking him as a top 10 guy. I think he has to win more to show that. But talent-wise, it's hard to say he's not. 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, as you just mentioned, with a pretty good ratio. The biggest issue was building a better defense. You got to be able to stop that run. I think they did that. And then the second issue, which we still have to see, is the play calling. Brandon Staley is a phenomenal coach in certain situations, but he gambles way too much. You would think he's playing in Vegas. And sometimes it pays off, and sometimes it looks like it's a really bad decision, like going up for a fourth, I think it was 4th and 10 on your own 26. That's not a good call. The Chargers finished 9-8 last season, and that easily could have flipped if it wasn't for bad late game play calling. They need to be able to finish those games, which is at your point. Like, how many times can you be in a really one touchdown situation and lose? Sometimes it's your time management. It can be, penalties, like what happens to the Cowboys all the time. For the Chargers, it's making a bad decision with 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and then it bites you in the rear end at the end of the game. However, I think this is still a very good team. They have a star-studded roster of players. Their new edge rushing tandem is going to be crazy in Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa if they both can stay healthy. I think the Chargers finished with a record of 11-6, but that's still obviously optimistic because they still have to show it. They still have to prove that they can do these things, that they can win those late game scenarios, that they can overcome bad play calling, that they can do all these little things that add up to, a championship caliber team. But this is a championship caliber roster. They have a lot of these phenomenal players, but they got to do it at a more consistent clip and in the moments that matter. I think that they do it this year.
I mean, yeah, you said it. They do it. They have a solid roster, and I agree. And I like the Chargers. I have nothing against the Chargers or Justin Herbert or anything. I just want to see the consistency, and I want to see just from them and the analysts and everything else. I want to see this because why are we crowning? Because you know what we're going to start hearing this year if they don't make the playoffs is it empty calories? Is it empty stats? You know who's going to be sitting back there watching the whole time with a smile on my face? Just that big S-eating grin. You know what that is? It's going to be me because I'm saying, I told you because I get mad. You look at that. We talked about how good Kirk Cousins is. It's what his stats have been the last 8 years, excuse me. Go look it up. People will be blown away. The best quarterback to never be viewed as a top 10 quarterback because he's not winning the big one. And Herbert's young, right? He's 2 years. But, he's 15 and 17, and then that goes back to, my two things. 13, he's played less games. But yet those two are always going to be compared to each other. And no, they are different quarterbacks. They're going to do different things. Does Tua have the arm of Herbert? No. Does he have better pocket presence? Probably. Is he more accurate? Yeah. Does he have the mobility and the size and everything of Herbert? No. So, but yet, he's mobile in his own right. So that's the whole thing. It's interesting to me. Those two are always going to be compared. But when you look at Kirk Cousins, how long do we wait until we start saying, well, Herbert's like that, he's balling, but where's the winning? Where's the success? And how come we consistently see those just boneheaded? To me, again, it could be totally biased on when I'm seeing it, but I feel like every time I watch the Chargers, I see a moment that he throws right into coverage. He turns the ball over when he shouldn't. I see that quite often for the Chargers. So for me, I knew this was going to be a point of contention. And this was going to be something that we were going to talk a lot about. But for me, in my second place, and I can ultimately kind of pivot between 1 and 2 here because I have the same record. So I'm going to say I have the Broncos at second and coming in second here. And Russell Wilson to me is the reason why. We've talked for a long time, and we talked last year a lot about how they arguably have the best one of the best receiving cores talent-wise in football. From top to bottom, this is a very talented receiving core, but they just have no one that could consistently get them the ball or take advantage of that. Well, in comes Russell Wilson. Massive upgrade over anything they've had since Peyton Manning, which also upsets me because they go from can't find a quarterback, Peyton Manning, Hall of Fame quarterback, win a Super Bowl, record-breaking offenses. Can't find a quarterback. Oh, Russell Wilson, Hall of Fame quarterback. Is he going to win the Super Bowl? I don't know. We'll see. But it must be nice to fall into that. Okay, you do have a new head coach, Nathaniel Hackett. But with a quarterback like Wilson, he's not going to have to worry as much. I know he didn't call plays, whatever, in Green Bay. He wasn't the main guy. You have Aaron Rodgers. Everything's easier because he makes everybody better. Well, he has a little bit of that in Russell Wilson, so he's not going to have to worry. It's obviously not Rodgers, but it's similar. And because you don't have to do much as a head coach. So despite a 7-10 record last year, Denver did outscore their opponents by 13 points. So not much, but it's there. They outscored their opponents. The rotating door, though, that's the big thing. It stopped. After 11 quarterbacks since Manning, 5 straight losing seasons. It's the first time since 63 and 72 that they've had that many losing seasons in a row. So it's been a while. They haven't averaged more than 21 points a game in 6 years. All that just changed overnight. They've had those weapons I've talked about. Cortland Sutton, okay, 2 years removed now from the ACL injury. Jerry Jeudy aims to jump up to his draft status. KJ Hamler is an ideal slot receiver, needs consistency. Wilson's going to bring that to the table. I do like Tim Patrick a lot. It sucks that he got hurt. He's gone for the season. Trading away Noah Fant doesn't help them. A new scheme's going to help. Ordinary offensive line. I believe so. It's ordinary offensive line, and what the scheme does. Russell Wilson's the end all be all to that. The impact he's going to make is the one that's second to none. But this all remains to be seen. It has to play out. Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, maybe the best backfield in football. I know you talked about him on Side 30, but Javonte Williams is a stud coming out of college, and he's going to ball, and that's going to help take pressure off Wilson and stuff too. Defense, they weren't great last year. They brought in Randy Gregory. That should help provide pressure opposite Bradley Chubb. Didn't have a sack last year, but had like double digits the year before. That guy's very Jekyll and Hyde. So having a guy like Gregory out there should help him a lot. Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, great safety tandem. And ultimately, this defense, it wasn't that great last year, even though people somehow believe that they were. It's easier to play defense when you have an offense that can score. I think this offense is going to play a lot better and give the defense an opportunity to play with the lead. And we're going to see a better defense all around. They ranked third in points allowed. So obviously that's not the best place to be. Third, meaning they gave up the third most points, I believe. So again, to me though, there's no excuses now. They have these weapons. They have these playmakers, and you have a quarterback that is the best deep ball thrower in football. So here you go. Wilson brings expectations. I'm buying in right now. I got the Broncos at 11-6, and it all is tied to really, when you look at this, you can make an argument. I think Derek Carr is very underappreciated, but you can make the argument. We're basing these on quarterback rankings, how we view them. I think we all have Mahomes at number 1, but I think Wilson is better than Herbert. So right now, that's why I'm rolling with them.
And it's hard to disagree at the moment, right? Wilson is a sensational talent. He's a guy, even though the Seahawks haven't been successful since their Super Bowl loss. I don't think they've won a playoff game in that time frame, but they've had really good seasons. He's
had very few losing seasons. I think he had last year was one, but he got hurt. I think he's had like one losing season, or just 2 years ago or something. It was like 8-8, or like the guy is like his record. We've talked about this. What's his record? Let's see. Record as a starter here. He is 104, 53-1. So the guy wins.
Yeah, it's incredible. And he's going to maximize the talent. I think that the Broncos had a lot of talent on that roster. We talked about it all of last year, that having a really good offense takes a lot of pressure off of your defense. If you're forcing your defense to make a stop every single time, it can get tiring throughout the course of a season. Like it's only 17 weeks, 18 weeks with the bye week, but it's still a marathon. Like it's a marathon of a season. Your body's taking a lot of punishment. The more time you spend on the field, the worse it is for you. Which leads me to my number 1, and obviously your number 1 too, the Chiefs. I said it a second ago. This is the gold standard of the AFC, but they've never looked more vulnerable. Losing Tyreek Hill and Byron Pringle will hurt so much more than people realize. Those were 2 of the best players when the script was completely broken. Whenever Mahomes had to roll right, him and Hill had that ESP where they just knew he would break his coverage, he would find out how to be open, and Mahomes would be able to find him. And if he couldn't find him, he had Pringle. Now you lost both of those guys that were able to play completely off of script. They replaced that with Juju Smith-Schuster or Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and you're just not going to cover that difference. MVS is one of the fastest players in the league. And obviously, that's going to make him a huge deep ball threat. But he hasn't caught above 53% once in his career. And that's not an Aaron Rodgers thing. Now you lose Tyrann Mathieu and Melvin Ingram on the defensive end of things. Those losses are future flexibility losses, so I can understand the direction the franchise is going with them. But it's going to affect them in this season. Absolutely. They brought in a ton of young, cheaper, little pieces to fill in the gaps here. But are they going to fill in the gaps or emerge as like legit playmakers on defense and offense, like the people that they lost? It's a tough question to answer when you're playing with a Super Bowl window that's wide open right now with Mahomes and his new $500 million contract. Even with all those negative things I just said, though, it's still the Chiefs. They still have one of the best coaches in Andy Reid. They have arguably the best quarterback in the entire NFL. We talk about these two being the most important positions in the entirety of football, and they have the number one and number top five in those categories. Last year, they started 3-4 through the first 7 weeks, and then they rattled off to finish a 12-5 season. Mahomes and Reid have paired for 4 straight, at least 12-win seasons 12, 12, 14, and 12. I expect them to do the same thing again, despite the rough schedule that they have. But their division got a lot better. You're not going to go 5-1 like last year. You're not going to sweep the Broncos and the Raiders. The Chiefs, I think, are going to go 11-6, and they're going to take the division by virtue of a tiebreaker.
So yeah, we were the same but different. So I have the Chiefs going 11-6 as well, and taking it by virtue of a tiebreaker over the Broncos, though. So 11-6, statistically, Mahomes, here's something to worry about, right? Statistically, Mahomes last year, the worst year of his career. Fewest passing yards, 284.6 worst passer rating, or 284.6 yards per game. That's the worst, right? Passer rating, 98.5. Touchdown to interception ratio sunk to a career low, but guess what? None of those are bad numbers. None of those are actually bad numbers. They're bad for him, but they're his lowest numbers. And he ended up having a career best 66.3 completion percentage, threw for almost 5,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, 13 picks. Problem is, like you mentioned, they lost a lot. Traded Hill. You can't replace what he does. No one does what he does. You can't replace that impact and that instant scoring. Now, players can score instantly. Every player, there's a player on every team, and we'll see every team in the league have those instant scores. That's what happens. But nobody can do it on any given play all the time like Hill can. I mean, look at that game against Buffalo. That back and forth. They took the lead right back, and part of that because Hill took that slant and just outran everybody on the team and took that to the end zone. And I mean, that game doesn't turn out that way if Hill doesn't do that. He took a 20-yard pass and took it 65 yards because he can do that. These guys can turn, there's a few players like that. He's one of them that can turn a pass that was behind the line of scrimmage into a touchdown like nothing. So just instant impact. So how do you replace that? Byron Pringle's gone. I was high on him as depth. That's, to me, I think they're going to miss him a little more than, I like how that was developing there, that chemistry and what he was becoming. Mecole Hardman avoided serious injury. Thank goodness. We talked about that a little bit when it happened, but we'll see how he rebounds from a groin injury. You mentioned about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I do like that, as well as Juju Smith. Should help. They drafted Sky Moore. Josh Gordon, they have him too, but they just cut him. I think he got picked up by the Titans. Okay, this is all these weapons around having Travis Kelce, who's the best tight end in football. Clyde Edwards-Helaire now pairs with Ronald Jones coming over from Tampa. That's a solid backfield. Jerick McKinnon comes back too. That's speed. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Andrew Wiley on the offensive line with Orlando Brown. Okay, that's big time. That offensive line is going to be great. On defense, they lose Melvin Ingram. They reworked Frank Clark's deal. They have him back. They have one of the best defensive tackles in football in Chris Jones. Linebackers is strength with Anthony Hitchens, Nick Bolton, and Willie Gay Jr. Yeah, I worry about the secondary. They lost Tyrann Mathieu, Travarius Ward, and Mike Hughes. Just like we talked about with the Chargers and spending their picks on defensive backs. It's a passing league, and this division is full of big time passers. But they spent half their draft picks on the secondary for a reason. Chiefs lost a lot in Hill. They lost a lot in Mathieu and others. But to me, they're still going to be a force with Mahomes dishing out the ball. And right now, until someone takes him down, I got to say on that, and they have the best coach in the division too. I got to see one of the best coaches in the NFL. I have them going 11-6 and winning that virtue, by way of a tiebreaker. But the Broncos, I think, are going to be right there with them. To me, the top two quarterbacks finish in the top spot, but 11-6 is lower than you think because of, the division's going to beat each other up. Yep. And the conference is tough. And I had one other division with this. I think the AFC East, but I have a tie at the top, and the Chiefs taking this at 11-6. I'm excited to see how this plays out, but we're the same. I think it's just got to show, they're the champs until they're not. And could the Chiefs end up being the last team in this division? It's as good as it is. There's an outside shot at it. We would be surprised, though. I think that the Hill thing might hurt them more than people think.
Yeah.
But yet people are still crowning them like this. But there's ultimately for us, would there be a surprise to see them end up being the team at the bottom? Bottom is relative. It could still be 10 wins, still 9 wins, but that's how good this division is. It's interesting.
It's absolutely loaded. And like I said, like some of these teams have crazy high ceilings, 12 wins for basically each one of them. And you can see the Chiefs kind of going the same way, but this is like one injury away from everything going south. And that you can say the same for a lot of teams. Some teams are built to handle at least one injury to a key position. But I think the Chiefs have never been in a worse spot in the last 4 years. In the Mahomes era, they have not been in a worse spot than they have been right now. And it seems like, that their stranglehold is loosening up a little bit.
It does. And if he gets hurt, everything changes.
Oh,
If he gets hurt, this all goes because his ceiling is what makes you think, okay, this receiving core could still be something. And obviously Travis Kelce changes all that too, because he's big time. But yeah, I mean, he gets hurt, and it's, if Russell Wilson gets hurt, that's right back to what they were. I mean, are we confident in what the Chargers have if Justin Herbert gets hurt, but what's behind Derek Carr and LA or Vegas, excuse me. Gosh, I keep every team but the right one, but every city, excuse me. But because that's where they should have gone. The Raiders just should have went to LA. If not stay in Oakland, they shouldn't have gone to Vegas. But anyway, there they are. That's the point, though. I believe every team's an injury away, like you said, but the quarterback position is super important. And these guys everybody's so top heavy, they all have one. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But again, like I said, you gotta respect it, and they're still at the top for me until they're not.
Yeah.
So I think they'll win it. I got to give them that edge. It feels like kind of a cop out, probably to a lot of people, but I'll give it to them right now. And I wouldn't be surprised, but the way this is, I would not honestly be shocked to see them not be at the top of the division just because of how good this is. But as always, guys, thank you for spending time with us on the MVP podcast. Next time you hear from us, we're going to be talking about our week 1 predictions and what we expect out of that big time Bills-Rams game to kick things off on Thursday Night Football. And then a full slate on Sunday, excuse me. Lots of big time games across the board, division games, a full slate. Every team's playing. So we're going to have that for you for a little while until we start hitting those bye weeks. I'm ready. I'm pumped. Best time of the year. We're here. We're full swing. And, let us know what you think about these predictions. Why we're wrong, why we're right. It'll obviously be right. But, if you don't think so. But with the MVP podcast, I'm Phil Van Pelt.
I'm Anthony Merrow.
And we will see you guys next week.